It started like any other quiet morning in early September. The sky outside was soft and gray, the kind of color that didn't ask for attention. In a modest corner cafe just off a street lined with old bookshops and sycamore trees, Keanu Reeves sat at a window table with his hands wrapped around a warm cup of tea. He wasn't wearing anything to stand out, just a dark hoodie, faded jeans, and that quiet energy he always carried. He looked like someone who had come in from the rain, even though it hadn't rained at all. It was his birthday, and no one seemed to notice. No balloons, no calls, no fancy brunches, no headlines. Not even the waiter who dropped off his tea knew. Keanu didn't mind. In fact, he had come to expect it. Over the years, he had learned how to find comfort in the quiet. He wasn't the type to make a big deal out of milestones. Wasn't counting the years as much as he was counting the moments of peace in between the noise. But something in his eyes that morning said he was holding something back. Maybe it was the way he looked outside, as if he was waiting for something or someone. He checked his phone only once, and when he saw the blank screen, he slid it face down on the table and didn't touch it again. He took another sip of tea, and his eyes drifted to the corner of the cafe where a little girl was helping her younger brother stir sugar into his cup. Keanu smiled gently. It was that kind of smile that didn't need words, the kind that said he understood something no one else could. The cafe owner, an older man with salt and pepper hair and a gentle limp, came by to clear a nearby table. He looked at Keanu and nodded politely, then paused. He squinted. "You look familiar," the man said. Keanu smiled again, the same polite one. "I get that sometimes, actor." Something like that. The man nodded, not pushing further, just chuckled softly and walked away. He probably knew exactly who he was. But he also knew better than to make a scene, and that was when Sandra Bullock walked in. She didn't burst through the door, didn't come in with cameras or attention. She was wearing a loose coat, her hair tied back, and sunglasses that didn't do much to hide her face from those who knew it. She scanned the room, and when her eyes landed on Keanu, her shoulders dropped, just a little relief. She walked toward him slowly, each step heavy with something unsaid. Keanu looked up. For a second he didn't smile. He didn't move. He just looked at her like he was still trying to believe she was really there. Then finally you came. Sandra pulled off her sunglasses. "You thought I wouldn't?" He didn't answer, but his eyes did. They held something warm and broken and quiet. She sat across from him without asking, and for a few moments neither of them spoke. Just looked at each other, like time had stretched wide between them, and now they were trying to pull it back. "You didn't answer my last text," she said finally. "I didn't know what to say. You could have said it's your birthday. You already knew." She reached into her coat pocket and placed a small, square box on the table. It was wrapped in plain brown paper, with a piece of twine tied around it. "Open it," she said. Keanu hesitated. Then he picked up the box and slowly peeled away the paper. Inside was a worn-out paperback book. The cover was faded, the pages slightly yellowed. He looked at the title and froze. It was the first book he had ever shared with her on set, back when they were shooting their first movie together decades ago. "I found it in a shop in Prague," Sandra said. "Same edition, same year." Keanu looked at the book for a long time, then he closed it gently and set it back down. "Why now?" he asked. Sandra looked at him carefully. "It's 'cause you stop letting people in around this time. It's 'cause every year you sit alone, and because you once told me that book reminded you what connection felt like." Keanu nodded slowly. Did. A silence settled between them. It wasn't awkward. It was thick, but not heavy. Like they were both walking across a bridge they hadn't used in years. "You know," Sandra said quietly, "there's something strange about how the world sees you." Keanu raised an eyebrow. "How so?" "They see the calm, the mystery, the kindness. But they don't see the part of you that still hurts. They don't see the part of you that's afraid to let birthdays feel like anything other than just another day." He didn't respond. Not right away. But his fingers brushed over the edge of the book, like he was trying to hold on to something real. "I didn't want anyone to make a fuss," he said. "Double quotes good," Sandra said, "'cause I didn't come to make a fuss. I came to sit with you, quietly, and remind you that you still matter, even on days you try to disappear." That was the moment when the cafe owner returned, holding a tiny slice of cake on a chipped white plate. He didn't say anything. He just placed it on the table between them, with one candle in the middle. I remembered the owner said, "Your birthday's in the back of that film magazine. The one I keep behind the counter." Keanu stared at the flickering candle. "Make a wish," Sandra whispered. "I don't really believe in that. Just do it anyway." He looked at her, then at the candle, and finally he closed his eyes. When he opened them again, he leaned forward and blew the candle out. It didn't feel like magic. Didn't feel like a miracle, but it felt like something had shifted. They sat in silence for a while longer. Sandra split the cake with her fork and pushed half toward him. He took it without a word. Outside, the clouds were starting to break, letting a bit of sunlight pour through the window. And for the first time in a long time, Keanu Reeves didn't feel forgotten on his birthday. But that was only the beginning. He had no idea what Sandra was planning next. And by the time it reached the internet, it would change everything. Keanu Reeves didn't ask where Sandra Bullock had come from or how she found him. Maybe he already knew. Maybe when two people share something real once, even time and silence can't erase the map between them. They had shared screen time. Sure, but more than that, they had shared quiet understanding. It's a kind that didn't need much maintenance, just the kind that waited until the right moment came. It's back around, and that moment was now. They sat in the cafe for another 30 minutes. After the cake, they talked a little, mostly about old movies, books, memories of places they had once gone together, but never truly left. Keanu wasn't used to talking this much. His words usually came slow and soft, but with Sandra, they found their way out. Like old songs remembered in a warm room. When they finally stood up to leave, Sandra touched his arm. "You still got the bike?" she asked. Keanu smiled. "Always good," she said, "'cause you're coming with me." He raised a brow. "Where?" "Just trust me." Keanu hesitated, but only for a moment. Then he nodded. Outside, the streets were busier now. Sunlight cutting between the buildings. Sandra didn't take a car. She walked. She led him through small alleys, past a florist where petals danced in the breeze, and down to a quiet side street where an old black Mustang sat waiting at the curb. She clicked the keys in her hand, and the lights flashed. "You still drive this thing?" Keanu asked. "You'd be surprised," she said, grinning. They got in, and she turned the key. The engine purred. Keanu leaned back in the seat and stared out the window. "This is a long way to not make a fuss," he murmured. Sandra chuckled. "Just wait." They drove for 20 minutes before reaching a small warehouse by the edge of the city. It didn't look like much from the outside. Faded paint, a rusted fence. But when Sandra opened the door and motioned him in, Keanu stepped into something he didn't expect. It was quiet. Warm light filtered from overhead string bulbs. And in the center of the space stood a collection of old movie props scattered. Film stills, behind the scenes, photos all from projects he had done over the years. But not the ones everyone knew him for. Not the blockbusters. No. These were the forgotten films. The quiet roles. Independent passion projects he had done, not for money or fame, but because something about the story had meant something to him. Stories about loss. Stories about hope. Stories that barely made it to the box office, but left a dent in someone's life. Keanu stepped closer to a framed photograph on the wall. It was a shot of him behind the scenes on a tiny film he did in the early 90s. A story about a man who lived out of his car and tried to reconnect with his estranged son. No one talked about that one. "How did you find this?" he whispered. Sandra stood beside him, hands in her pockets. "I talked to the cinematographer," she said, "and the director, and a girl who used to run the lighting board. They still remember how you stayed behind after wrap and helped the crew load cables in the rain?" Keanu looked around. The walls were covered with quiet moments of his life that no one ever captured. Him eating lunch with a child actor off camera, him carrying a box for an injured grip, him laughing alone at a joke only he heard. "You said no fuss," Sandra said. "So I didn't throw a party. I made a memory room." Keanu walked to the center where a small projection screen stood. Sandra hit play. A short film began. Not one he acted in, but one made by people he had helped in. Old stunt coordinator. A young director he had mentored. An actress he had stood up for when the studio tried to cut her role. They were all saying thank you, one by one. Simple words. Quiet voices. He watched with his arms crossed, eyes fixed. At one point, he blinked a little longer than usual, and Sandra noticed. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," he said. "Just forgot some of this. That's why I'm reminding you." When the short video ended, the screen went dark, and the lights in the room brightened just slightly. Sandra handed him a folded piece of paper. "There's one more part," she said. Keanu opened it. It was an address, handwritten. "What's this?" he asked. "It's a place I think you need to visit," she said softly. "Someone there wants to see you." Keanu's brows drew together. "Who?" Sandra didn't answer. She just touched his shoulder gently. "You'll understand when you get there." Before he could ask more, the door behind them opened in. A quiet voice called his name. "Keanu." They turned. A woman stood in the doorway, older mid-60s maybe, with gray streaks in her hair and kind eyes that hadn't dulled with age. Keanu blinked. Recognition dawned slowly. "Is that—" he whispered. Sandra smiled. "Her name's Miriam," she said. "She worked on the wardrobe team on your very first film. She hasn't seen you in 30 years. Keanu stepped forward, slowly, like he was walking into another lifetime. Miriam took his hands. "You remembered me," she said. "How could I forget?" He whispered. "You fixed my jacket every morning, even when I didn't ask." Laughed. "You looked like a mess back then, but you always said thank you. No one else did." They sat together on the bench while Sandra gave them space. Keanu listened as Miriam told stories he had almost forgotten. How he helped her carry costume racks when her hands shook. How he gave her son a ride home from school one day when the boy had missed the bus. How he once stayed up late fixing a broken button so she could go home early. "I never forgot those things," she said, "and I'm glad you didn't either." After she left, Keanu walked back to Sandra. "How long did you plan this?" he asked. She shrugged. "Months." "Why?" Her voice was soft. "Because people don't always get told what they mean to others, especially not people like you. Spend so much of your time giving. I just wanted you to feel what it's like to receive." Keanu didn't say anything. He looked up at the light bulbs, at the shadows on the wall, at the photos of a younger version of himself. Quiet, unnoticed, but kind. And he felt something rising in his chest. Not sadness. That. Joy. Something in between. He had spent so many years disappearing into roles, into cities, into quiet corners of cafes. He had almost forgotten what it felt like to be seen. But today, Sandra Bullock had changed that. And tomorrow, the rest of the world would see what she had done, not because she planned it, but because someone had filmed the entire thing, and that video was already making its way online. Keanu Reeves never liked being the center of attention. He had spent most of his life stepping aside, letting others take the spotlight. Even on set, even at premieres, he would always choose the edge of the crowd. The quiet spot, the shadow, not the flame. So when he woke up the next morning and found over 50 unread messages on his phone, a small knot formed in his chest. He opened one from a friend. "You seen this? You're all over the internet." Then another. "Dude, Sandra Bullock is a legend. Did you know she filmed this?" His brows drew together. He opened his browser and tapped on the first video link, and there it was, a 7-minute video shot. In warm handheld style, it started with him sitting in the cafe, alone, sipping tea. Then Sandra walking in. The gift, the slice of cake, the candle, the quiet smile. The title read, "What Sandra Bullock Did for Keanu Reeves' Birthday Will Melt Your Heart." As the video played, Keanu felt like he was watching someone else's life. His own gestures small, shy, hesitant were now the centerpiece of thousands of comments. People noticing how he waited for Sandra to sit first. He smiled softly. When she handed him the book, how he looked almost surprised to be cared for. Then came the second part of the video. Someone had been filming discreetly inside the memory room. Maybe it was one of the crew Sandra had brought in. Maybe it was a quiet fan who just couldn't help it. Either way, it showed everything. The walls of forgotten films, the thank you video, Miriam, and most of all, the way Keanu looked at each moment like he didn't think he deserved any of it. By the end of the video, Keanu had tears in his eyes. He wasn't even sure why. The video wasn't flashy. There was no music swelling for effect, no voiceover, just raw clips stitched together gently. It didn't make him look like a superstar. It made him look like a human being. And that's what people were responding to. As he scrolled through the comments, his heart slowed. I've never seen anyone so humble. The way he looks at her when she gives him that book, it's like he forgot people could care. This is the kind of man you protect at all costs. Sandra Bullock is a real one for doing this quietly. Within hours, the video had crossed 3 million views. By noon, it was trending. By evening, it was on the homepages of every major news site, with headlines like, Keanu Reeves celebrated his birthday in silence, Sandra Bullock made it unforgettable. Why everyone's crying over this 7-minute video. How one quiet gesture reminded us what kindness looks like. Keanu didn't leave his house that day. He didn't answer calls. He sat near the window with the book Sandra had given him, still wrapped in the same twine, now resting gently in his lap. He didn't know what to say. Not to the world and not to her. But Sandra didn't wait for a thank you. She showed up again that night. This time she knocked on his door. Keanu opened it slowly. Sandra stood there with a bag of takeout and a crooked smile. Thought you could use some noodles, she said. Keanu stepped aside, letting her in without a word. She moved through the familiar space, setting the bag on the coffee table like she had done it 1,000 times before. He finally spoke as she unpacked the containers. You didn't tell me someone was filming. Sandra glanced at him. I didn't know they were. You sure? Positive? He nodded slowly. It's everywhere. I know. I don't like attention. I know that too. But I'm not mad, he said softly. She looked up. I just forgot what it felt like to be remembered, he said. Sandra's eyes softened. You're not easy to forget, Keanu. They ate together in silence, the kind of silence that didn't need filling, the kind that came when two people understood each other without trying as they finished. Keanu leaned back, eyes on the ceiling. You didn't have to do all this, he said, double quotes. I know. But I'm glad you did, Sandra smiled. Me too. He looked over at her. You knew this would go viral, didn't you? She shrugged. Maybe, but that wasn't the point. What was the point then? To remind you, she said, that kindness is loud even when it's whispered. Keanu let that sink in. It didn't need unpacking, just needed time. Then his phone buzzed again. This time it was a number he didn't recognize. He picked it up. Hello? Quiet voice responded. Hi, is this Keanu Reeves? He hesitated. Yes, my name's Daniel. I just wanted to say thank you. I saw your video. I've been struggling, really struggling. And something about seeing you, how gentle you were, how you didn't expect anything from anyone I don't know. It reminded me that maybe there's still some good left in the world. Keanu swallowed hard. Thank you, he said softly. No, Daniel replied. Thank you. He hung up. Keanu stared at the phone for a long time. Sandra didn't say anything. She didn't have to. The next morning, donations started pouring in. Not to Keanu, but to small charities he had quietly supported over the years. A literacy program. In Toronto, a foundation for children's cancer research, a fund for retired stunt performers. All of them suddenly flooded with new support. No official ask. No campaign. Just people seeing the video and finding ways to show love. Back news outlets began publishing deep dives into Keanu's kindness stories that had once been whispers. Him giving up his seat on subways, him giving away part of his salary to crew. Him showing up unannounced at charity bike rides. The world had always liked Keanu. But now, they were beginning to see him not as a celebrity, but as someone who had quietly carried weight for years, and never asked for applause. And all of this started from one birthday, from one moment, from one friend who chose to show up. Not with cameras or crowds, but with presence, and it wasn't over. Because Sandra had one more thing planned. Something that even Keanu didn't know about. And this time, it would reach far beyond him. 3 days had passed since Sandra Bullock walked into that cafe and lit a candle on a slice of cake, but the ripples hadn't stopped by now. The video had over 20 million views. The story was being translated into languages Keanu couldn't even read. News anchors in Tokyo, Sydney, and Johannesburg were playing clips of his soft smile, his quiet thank you, his stunned expression when Sandra handed him that book. But the thing that moved people the most wasn't the video. It was what happened after. An anonymous user had posted a new thread online. The title was simple. If Keanu Reeves ever helped you, tell your story here. Within hours, the thread exploded. The stories poured in. Hundreds. Then thousands. And they weren't about big things. They were about the quiet acts, eh? Homeless man in Los Angeles wrote how Keanu once sat beside him on a cold night and gave him his scarf. No cameras around. A production assistant shared how she was having a panic attack on set, and Keanu sat beside her trailer for over an hour, not saying much, just being there until her breathing slowed. A struggling musician posted that Keanu tipped him $200 after a sidewalk performance and told him, "Your music is needed, don't stop." And there were more. A girl who lost her brother to cancer said Keanu had sent her a handwritten note years ago. No one ever knew. A nurse who treated Keanu's sister said he visited every single day and thanked each staff member individually by name. Keanu read these stories in silence. In disbelief, "I don't even remember half of these," he said quietly to Sandra as they sat in his living room. She smiled, because they weren't performative. They were part of who you are. Keanu leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "This feels like too much." "You've spent your whole life making people feel seen," she said. "Now it's your turn." But there was something deeper stirring in Keanu. He wasn't used to being looked at this way. It felt exposed and beautiful and terrifying. He stepped outside for a walk just to clear his head, but something happened he didn't expect as he turned the corner near the bookstore. A teenage boy approached him nervously. "Excuse me," the boy said. Are you him?" Keanu paused. "I might be." The boy smiled shyly. "My dad left last year. I've been angry. Like, really angry. But my mom showed me your birthday video, and I don't know, man." Cried. I hadn't cried in a year. Just made me think, maybe not everyone leaves on purpose. Maybe some people just hurt too quietly. Keanu didn't know what to say, so he did what he always did. He placed a hand gently on the boy's shoulder. "You're doing better than you think," he said. The boy nodded and walked away. Keanu stood on the sidewalk for a long time after that. He realized this wasn't about him anymore. This wasn't just a birthday video. This had become something else, a mirror people were using to see themselves better. And that's when Sandra sent the text. "Meet me at the studio tonight. 7 p.m. sharp." Keanu arrived on time. When he walked inside, he found a small team of people waiting. Cameras, lights, sound techs. But it wasn't a production crew. These were volunteers. Friends of Sandra. People she'd quietly gathered behind the scenes. At the center of the room stood a circle of chairs, and in each one sat someone from the stories, the nurse, the production assistant, the street, musician, the girl who got the letter. All of them real. People, real lives, all changed by a quiet act from Keanu Reeves. He froze. "What is this?" he whispered. Sandra stepped beside him. "They wanted to thank you in person," she said softly. "And I wanted you to see what your kindness looks like when it echoes." Keanu didn't move. He looked at each face, each smile, each tear, and something inside him cracked open. He took the first step forward. One by one, he walked to each person, hugged them, listened to their stories again, said nothing when there was nothing to say, cried when words failed, held hands when hearts trembled, and then, when they were all finished, Someone in the back said, "Can we light a candle for all the quiet helpers out there?" Sandra nodded. A small tray was brought forward with candles, and one by one they lit them. Not for the cameras, not for the internet, but for the ones who loved without asking for applause, for the ones who stayed behind after the crowd left, for the ones who offered tea instead of advice, for the ones who made birthdays feel like home. Even when home was far, Keanu lit his candle last, and as the flame flickered in his hand, he looked around the room. He didn't see fans. He didn't see stories. He saw a circle of souls that had once been strangers, now connected by one quiet kindness. And Sandra watched from the corner, tears in her eyes, because she knew the best part hadn't happened yet. She had planned one final gift, something the world would never see coming. And this time, it wasn't just for Keanu, it was for everyone who had ever felt forgotten. The night after the candle circle, Keanu Reeves didn't sleep. He lay in bed, hands folded behind his head, the soft hum of city traffic far away in the background. But his thoughts weren't on the noise outside. They were still in that room, surrounded by the faces he had quietly impacted. People whose names he'd never known, lives he'd touched without even meaning to. He thought about the girl with the letter, the musician with tired eyes, the nurse who remembered his sister. He thought about how they cried, not because they were sad, but because something inside them had been seen, acknowledged, honored. And it all began with one quiet moment in a cafe. But what stayed with him most was Sandra. Not her presence, but her patience. Not her voice, but her silence when he needed it. Not her plan, but her faith that he was worth the effort. By morning, the world had turned louder. More articles, more hapshed, more stories pouring in. But Keanu remained still until his phone rang. Not a text, not a call from the media, an actual call from a private number. He picked up. A woman's voice spoke softly. "Is this Keanu?" "Yes, this is Maury from the United Peace Coalition. We've been watching everything, and we were wondering, would you join us as a guest speaker for World Kindness Day next week?" Keanu blinked. "Me?" He asked. "Yes," she said, gently, not as an actor. "As a person, your story has reached places no campaign ever could. We just want you to talk about what kindness means to you. Nothing fancy, no pressure, just you." Keanu didn't answer right away. He stared out the window at a tree whose leaves were starting to turn orange, and slowly he nodded. "I'll do it." The woman thanked him. The call ended, and the silence returned until it was broken by a knock. Sandra, again she, was holding 2 coffees and a small folder tucked under her arm. Keanu opened the door and gave her a look. "You really don't give up, do you?" She smiled. "You haven't seen anything yet." They sat on his porch, feet resting on the wooden railing, the morning sun warm but not heavy. Sandra handed him the folder. "What's this?" he asked. "Read it." He opened it. Inside were blueprints, building plans, donation lists, outlines, partnership letters, and at the top, single title, "The Quiet Room, a Sanctuary for Kinniskinu." Looked up. Sandra leaned forward. "It's a center." "Not a," she said. "Not a museum, not a school, not a charity. Something in between. A place where people can come in silence, share stories, light candles, write letters, listen to others. And most importantly, remember how it feels to be gentle." Keanu blinked. "You're building this?" "No," she said. "We are. Me. You've already done the hard part. The rest is just a building." Keanu flipped through the folder again. There were notes from architects, testimonies from the people who had been in that candle circle, even letters from strangers offering to volunteer. One from a man in Peru, one from a retired librarian in Ohio, another from a boy in Morocco who simply wrote, "I don't speak English, but I know love when I see it." Keanu closed the folder and sat still for a long time. Then he whispered, "How did this happen?" Sandra's voice was gentle. "It happened the moment you didn't walk away from your own story. He looked down at his hands, hands that had held letters, hands that had built motorcycles, hands that had trembled in grief, hands that had never asked for recognition. "What do we call this place again?" He asked. "The quiet room," she said, "because that's what kindness sounds like." He nodded slowly, and for the first time in years, his heart didn't feel like a burden. It felt like a beginning. On the morning of World Kindness Day, the event hall was full. No flashing lights, no, it's red carpet. Just a simple stage with a single stool. Keanu walked out with slow steps. He didn't wear a suit, just jeans, a soft sweater, and a calm presence. The room quieted instantly. He sat down, adjusted the microphone, and looked around. Then he began. "I don't speak for the world," he said. "I'm not a leader. I'm not even very good with words." He paused. "But I've learned something. That kindness doesn't always look like headlines. Sometimes it looks like giving your sandwich to someone who forgot theirs. Sometimes it's sitting beside someone without saying anything. Sometimes it's just showing up, even when no one asked." His voice didn't rise. It stayed steady, soft, real. Double quotes. "I think we forget how much power we hold when we're quiet. When we choose to stay, when we notice." He looked out at the crowd, and somewhere in the middle row, Sandra sat, her hands folded in her lap, tears in her eyes. "Someone once told me," Keanu continued, "that kindness is loud even when it's whispered. And I believe that now." He looked down for a moment, then up again. "So thank you. Not for celebrating me, but for reminding me that the smallest moments matter." He stood slowly. The room stayed still. No music, no applause. Yet just breathing, human, open, unfiltered. And then someone stood, then another and another, until the entire room rose not in noise, but in presence, a standing silence, the kind that held more weight than 1,000 cheers. And somewhere backstage, a quiet email was being sent. An announcement in the quiet room was opening next spring. The land had been donated. The funding had poured in, most from anonymous donors who just wrote. This made me feel again. And in the middle of all this, Keanu Reeves walked off the stage, not as a celebrity, not as a symbol, but as someone who had finally accepted one thing. He mattered because he gave without needing to be known, and someone, somewhere, had finally given back. But there was still one more part left. A part Sandra hadn't revealed. A part even Keanu wasn't ready for, and it would happen not in a room, but at a place he never expected. Keanu Reeves thought it was over. He thought the speech was the final chapter. He thought the quiet room being built in his name, the thousands of letters, the outpouring of love, it was enough. More than enough. And he was grateful, deeply, quietly, gratefully overwhelmed in a way he didn't know how to express. But Sandra Bullock wasn't done, because for her, it was never about one birthday. It was never about going viral. It was about healing something deeper in him, something that had stayed untouched for too long, something that still lived in the quiet corners of his heart. And that final part of the journey waited at a small address tucked deep in the hills, far from Los Angeles, far from cameras, far from fans, just a dirt road, a gate, and silence. "We're going for a drive," Sandra had said that morning. She didn't tell him where, didn't ask. He trusted her now more than he trusted most of the world. They drove 4 hours, through winding roads and tall trees. The air grew cooler, birds flew low over fields of wild grass. And finally, Sandra parked beside a small wooden cabin with chipped paint and a porch that leaned slightly to one side. Keanu stepped out slowly. "Where are we?" he asked. Sandra didn't answer. She just walked to the front door and opened. It inside was a single room, a fireplace, a table, shelf lined with books. And on the far wall, hung in a delicate frame, was a photograph of Keanu's sister. His breath caught. He stepped forward, his hands trembling. The photo was one he hadn't seen in years. She was laughing, her head tilted back, sunlight catching her face. It was from before the illness, before the long nights. Before the goodbye, Keanu turned slowly to Sandra. "How? Where did you find this?" "Your mom," she said softly. I called her weeks ago. Told her I was planning something for you. She sent me this. Said you'd forgotten it existed. He looked at the frame again. His eyes filled, but he didn't let the tears fall. Not yet. Sandra pointed to a small bench by the window. He walked over, and there on the cushion was a box. Inside the box was something even more unexpected. Letters, handwritten, dozens. Of them, he picked one up. It was from his sister. From the early years of her treatment, the ink was faded, but her voice was strong. You're the kindest soul I know, even when you don't know it. You give people hope just by being quiet. Keep being you, Kai. He sat down, read another, and another some he remembered. Most he didn't. They had been stored away, packed in a forgotten box. Pieces of her love waiting to return home. Keanu didn't speak. He didn't move for a long time, until finally. He wept. Not just for her, not just for the past, but for the weight he'd carried silently for so long, and for the way Sandra had brought it all back, not to haunt him, but to heal him. He stood slowly, walked outside, and looked up at the sky. The wind was gentle. A bird flew across the open sky, and something in him let go, something he hadn't realized. He was still holding. He turned back to Sandra, his voice barely a whisper. Why did you do all this? Sandra stepped closer. Because you deserved to be loved the way you love. Keanu closed his eyes, and when he opened them, he smiled. Not the soft, polite smile people knew, but something fuller. A smile that said he had finally come home to himself. Months passed. The quiet room opened. People came, not in crowds, not for photos, but in ones and twos, couples, mothers and sons, strangers, grieving friends. People just needing space. They sat in silence, wrote letters, lit candles, and read the stories of people who had made a difference without shouting. On the wall was a plaque. No logo. No brand. Just one sentence. Inspired by the life of a man who never needed to be only understood. Keanu visited the room once a month. Never announced. Never. Just needed presence. And he would just be, and word quietly spread. That if you went on the right day, you might sit beside Keanu Reeves and he might not say a word, but his silence would say everything 1 year later on the next. Birthday. Keanu walked into the same cafe from the beginning. The same seat, same tea. But this time, it wasn't empty. A little boy and girl were sitting at the corner table with their mom. The boy dropped his cookie. Keanu picked it up with a gentle smile and handed it back. The mom smiled at him. You're him, right? Keanu nodded gently. Maybe. The girl looked at him and whispered, Happy birthday. He froze. How did you know? The mom grinned. We saw the video. We light a candle for you every year now. Keanu felt something warm rise in his chest. He sat down, and for the first time in his life, his birthday didn't feel like a burden. Felt like a bridge because one friend had seen his silence end. Answered it with presence, and the world followed. Not with noise, but with quiet love.